In Oklahoma City, Mayor David Holt operates with the oily precision of a televangelist, preaching a sanitized gospel of civic renaissance, cultural prosperity, and economic miracles. Yet beneath this polished veneer, his methods reveal unsettling echoes of another local figure, Pastor Jim Vineyard, whose reign at Windsor Hills Baptist Church was notorious for manipulation, cruelty, and predatory control masked in righteousness. Holt, in the secular pulpit of municipal governance, mirrors Vineyard's coercive charisma, exploiting power differentials with a calculated benevolence that obscures profound abuses. Jim Vineyard manipulated those he held sway over by leveraging vulnerability, sexual shame, youthful confusion, and profound isolation to maintain unquestioning obedience. He practiced brutal tactics of humiliation under the pretense of pastoral counseling, preying upon teenage girls, cornering them with grotesque interrogations, assaulting their innocence under the sanctimonious guise of spiritual guidance. Similarly, Holt exercises political power to silence dissent and shame critics, operating within a polished corporate hierarchy. Both men, in their separate spheres, cloak abuses behind smiles, behind a performance that seeks to convince victims they somehow deserve their humiliation. Consider Craig Freeman, the current city manager, once entangled with Vineyard at Windsor Hills and now situated at Holt's side. Freeman's trajectory encapsulates Oklahoma City's deep cycle of moral complicity. Having witnessed the corrosive power of Vineyard firsthand, Freeman now helps orchestrate Holt's governance, a governance built on the extraction of wealth, the sanitization of corruption, and the suppression of accountability. Freeman might claim ignorance, or might indeed acknowledge parallels, but chooses complacency because the quiet paycheck, the comfortable silence. The numbness of compliance is far less distressing than confronting the re-traumatizing reality of repeated complicity. Here we find relevance in Dr. Gabor Mate's profound analysis of trauma. Mate reminds us that trauma is not merely the infliction of pain, but the profound internalization of powerlessness. The survivors at Windsor Hills lived under Vineyard's shadow, internalizing shame, fear, and hopelessness, forced into silence and submission as coping mechanisms. In Holt's Oklahoma City, Freeman exemplifies a different manifestation of trauma, an unconscious surrender to cycles of exploitation, rationalizing inaction, internalizing powerlessness as pragmatic acceptance. Freeman is not merely indifferent. He embodies a survival mechanism born from unresolved trauma, turning complicity into rationalization, cowardice into convenience. Vineyard hid his abuses behind biblical literalism, weaponizing scripture to silence his victims and their protectors, calling down curses and divine threats upon those who challenge his authority. Holt wraps himself in the secular scripture of neoliberal growth, sanctifying the extraction of wealth through MAPS programs, elite arenas, and Olympic spectacles, all while condemning detractors as heretics to progress. Dissenters are dismissed as backward, ungrateful to the benevolent overlordship that promises redemption through prosperity and civic pride. In Vineyard's time, those who stood up against abuse faced a toxic backlash, threats, humiliation, and isolation from their families and communities. Holt's critics face subtler, but no less insidious forms of ostracism, exclusion from decision-making tables, quiet blacklisting from media coverage, economic disenfranchisement, and systematic marginalization. Freeman's passivity represents a collective resignation to this normalized trauma, an acknowledgement that opposing such entrenched power means personal and professional peril. Power perpetuates itself not only through overt violence, but through manufactured consent, silence born of resignation and apathy. Democracy in Holt's regime is emptied of its substance, citizens transformed into passive consumers of spectacle rather than active participants in governance. Holt, much like Vineyard, is less interested in genuine spiritual or civic renewal than in reinforcing a status quo that benefits an entrenched elite, using the language of redemption and prosperity as his moral shield. Moral bankruptcy underlies Holt's strategies, revealing how power, cloaked in respectability, quietly dismantles democratic accountability and reinforces profound inequalities, all while victims are gaslit into believing their suffering and their powerlessness are deserved. Both Vineyard and Holt share an unwavering belief in their entitlement to power, driven not by benevolence but by the sheer intoxication of dominance. Mayor David Holt, like Jim Vineyard, exists in a sphere of carefully managed appearances. He offers the spectacle of progress without substance, the illusion of community while deepening divisions, and the promise of prosperity while stripping communities of their dignity and autonomy. His enablers, those like Craig Freeman, who once knew firsthand Vineyard's destructive presence, embrace complicity, having learned, consciously or unconsciously, that resistance is futile, that survival means alignment, silence, acceptance of the intolerable. Yet within Mate's framework, there lies the potential for healing, for breaking these cycles of traumatization and resignation. To stand against the Holts and Vineyards of the world demands courage, self-awareness, and community solidarity. It demands a recognition of shared trauma, a commitment to authenticity, accountability, and truth-telling. It demands the acknowledgement that the seductive power of complicity is, ultimately, destructive and self-defeating. Only when Oklahoma City confronts this cycle, only when people like Freeman and others awaken to their complicity in perpetuating trauma, can the grip of men like Holt and Vineyard be loosened. Only through confrontation, not complacency, truth, not spectacle, can this community heal from decades of abuse masked in the language of faith and progress. The journey toward genuine civic redemption begins when trauma is no longer hidden, but openly acknowledged, faced, and courageously transformed.